Donc je me mets là-bas pour tirer.
The Genoa is stowed for the next couple days until we get the Genoa halyard, which is a good segue into the Genoa halyard problem, right, Gail? What was the problem with the Genoa halyard? Oh, she's not talking to the camera. What happened with the Genoa halyard is they put this cover on it. And the cover's to prevent abrasion and stuff like that, but it made the halyard so thick that when we tried to drop the halyard, it wouldn't go. It went down 90% of the way, and the cause of that, just the thickness of the cover plus the original cordage, would not go over the sheave. So.
Non mais là, qu'est-ce qui passe ici là? Qu'est-ce qu'il y a là?
Rien. Il a changé endroit de drisse pour le grand bois. When the riggers came to the boat, we realized the Genoa halyard's protective cover was not causing the jam. Instead, the way I had attached the second segment of the Genoa halyard after the halyard tensioner was causing the problem.
And we reverse it, so
the luggage tag should be on the what I call quasi-messenger line, not on the halyard.
Exactly. So
what the bat tool does is, here's the batten on a Genoa. These are vertical battens so they can roll away. And they're attached by a little bit of Velcro being in this channel. And to remove the Velcro, you pull gently but firmly, if there is such a thing, on this line, which then causes the Velcro bit to come flying out. So we'll try to do that. That's step one. Boom. Success. Jason's an idiot and sends the line that disengages the Velcro down into the pocket, and Gail comes to the rescue. This is the tip that goes into the sail first. It is the OS, Gail, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the OS1, which is the bit that does not go into the sail. I mean, it goes in, but just marginally. Don't get them confused, otherwise you will orphan a tip inside your sail. If that happens, only sail surgery will get it out, meaning you have to unstitch the batten pocket to get that tip out. Now, the company that makes these Genoa battens is called KO Spruce, and they're 151 centimeters long, and here again are the tips that do not enter the sail. Those are the OS ones, and the OSs are all the way at the other end, and you do enter the sail. By the way, this is the technical room, and you got a little spinnaker waiting around, and a code 0, and a cockpit cushion. Some people try to live here. I just use it for sailboat parts. This is the impeller. So it's the pump that sucks seawater out of the ocean, and it comes from right over here, is where the water's coming in. This little spinny wheel sends the water up through this hose, and then it goes through this item, which is called a siphon brake. We'll get to that in a second. And the water continues on, and it goes through the heat exchanger. And the heat exchanger basically has the salt water zipping by one side and the coolant on the other side. And the heat from the coolant goes to the salt water and goes overboard. Now, what's interesting about that is the coolant is actually goes back to the engine because it's nice and clean stuff that the engine likes to touch, and cools the engine, grabs some more heat, and the process keeps doing. So the coolant always stays in the engine, and the seawater comes from the ocean and back out to the ocean. Now, all the way back there is the seawater strainer. That's when little creatures come in before they get to go into the engine, they get trapped there. You kind of laugh, but I had little red crabs when I was in the Galapagos get caught in my sea strainer, and I had friends who got a squid caught. So you never know who will get sucked into your engine. Problem with this boat, it's not the easiest sea strainer to check. Okay, so what are the things we're gonna check? We're gonna check the belts. Now this belt here, it's more substantial because this goes to my second alternator. This alternator is made by Mastervolt as well, and it produces, I think 120 amps. To double check that. I think in reality I was producing more like 90, which is great. It's plenty for this boat. And then the second alternator is in blue by Nani, and this one's job is to charge the starter batteries. It doesn't need to be powerful. This one is so powerful that it takes away, I don't know, about 3 horsepower, they say, from the engine. Other things you check to make sure your fuel filters, no problems there. Just look around for any dirt. I check my coolant. I put a little sticker there to remind myself what the amount of coolant is when at cool temperature. And now I will go check the oil, which you won't see. Interest. This is the anti-siphon loop. If a siphon is engaged, it then drops the water from the anti-siphon right into the area in front of the engine. Not sexiest, but that works. That's nice and tight, and you're just checking the amount of deflection that you can get. That's listed in the manual. Big thing I look for is any water or oil, and so looking underneath the engine, not seeing anything. So this is the starter battery, and what's to notice? Well, the red line, red cable, is the plus side, and the plus side goes straight to a fuse. So if this battery were ever to short out, the energy would stop flowing. In addition, this fuse is also, I believe, allows it to be monitored on how much is flowing through for the voltmeter. And that appears, I think, on the B&G, on the Mastervolt. Then over here is the plus side. And that power then goes back to the starter motor in the solenoid. So I've tested my engine, and I try to go to max RPM, and I'm a few hundred RPM shy of that. And the mechanic said, oh, it's because the prop's a little big. And over-propping an engine has some issues. One of them is that you can run your engine at too high an RPM. And so maybe I'm running it at too high an RPM, or maybe I'm just not getting the right RPM reported by my analog gauge. So I'm going to use a meter which will watch this little reflective strip go by and count how many times it's done. And that looks like it's connected directly to the camshaft. But I'm also going to measure what my secondary alternators, the spin is, which I think is a ratio of 2.5. I'm going to check the standard alternator as well, which maybe I'm wrong, but I think might be the same. And then I'm also checking this main pulley. And Amazon sells this device which lets you measure the RPMs on the engine rather than trusting the gauge. And I've done that, and the results are... This is what I think is the camshaft. It's going at 1,000 RPMs when I'm asking for 800. Here's my jumbo alternator, which has a ratio, so it being a much bigger number makes sense. So it looks like maybe my analog gauge is off by 200 RPM, but I'm not ready to agree to that just yet, because the numbers were a little flighty when I was taking them. Okay, we're back into the exciting technical room area, and what we're doing is learning about the battery switches. So over here is the main battery switch, which I really never want to turn off when there's load. This is the battery switch to the engine, starter battery, and then this switch over here would allow you to combine the two circuits. That is kind of an emergency use only thing. Now, how do these switches work? Well, this is on, and on is indicated by the panels being parallel, but also pushed in. So let me turn just this guy off. That's the off position. But to turn it on, you have to push it in, and then turn it. A little different than what I'm used to on the last boat. And now I'm going to put some labels on there. Right here are two breakers, and they take the power from the wattancy and they send it either to the engine or to the house batteries. I'm not 100% sure I needed both, but in case of emergency it'd be nice to make sure you're also topping up your engine batteries. Right now the breakers are in the down position. There's black, that one's yellow. If I raise them, then power will go, and this device below here, that's the wattancy charge controller. So that takes in three-phase power from the actual hydro unit, converts it into nice 14 some volts, and heads off to the batteries we just mentioned. Right over here next to it is a relay, and then somehow or another the entire electrical system went dead. And I have to say, I had a little bit of a panic. What you're supposed to do, besides panic, is just try to work the problem. And the first thing is to see if the batteries are giving power to this whole supply. So over here, where you see my red pointer, this is basically the breaker box in your house at home. It's a 12 volt. The cause of my power outage was I pressed this button, and this turns on and off the charger. And I turned off the charger while having shore power. And that spike freaked my batteries out, and they isolated themselves with their own little special fuses. Now, I haven't been able to recreate that. Not that I'm really eager to recreate it, but that's was my mistake. And then they blew their fuses, is maybe not the right word for it. Let's go see what they look like when they get tripped. Okay, so here are the batteries, the offending members of the party, and you can see the yellow button right there and how it's indented. When the batteries go defend themselves, that button pops out. And then I have two batteries, and so both buttons had popped out. You can see the other one on the far right of the screen. And that was the cure. Just having to push those buttons back in, and the world came back all lit up. There are a maze of wires here. But the question you want to know first on an electrical system is, well, how do I test if this whole maze of wires at the beginning are getting electrical power? Well, right there at the bottom of this C-zone panel here, that is the positive. And over here is the negative. So we'll call it the black, and that's the red. And so what we're going to test is whether from the batteries, this whole maze is getting power. If it's not getting power, nothing's going to work. So let's go see. I don't know how people do electrical demonstrations with one hand. Let's see if I can do this. Right over here, and that's this sort of panel. And then there's this second one, which is right over here, the black probe, which is on the positive bar. And we get, when we do that effort, we get 13.3 volts. So this means it's powered up. That's a pretty basic thing, but you need to know this for any boat.